hunter crouched silently as the moaning got louder and closer. He could feel the hair on his dog's back stand on end as the wind sorry, I'm recording. In podcast number 3, I talked about the multipass lighting setup that we use for PI, but I didn't talk much about why you might choose to use a multipass approach over a all-in-the-render single-pass technique. First off, here's an example of a scene that we lit with just one pass. There's no occlusion, no compositing, you hit render and this is what comes out. So to show you how this works, here's a very simple test scene with one light shining from overhead. It's the classic example of bad CG lighting. First, we'll turn on shadows, and let's also make it into an area light. And we'll adjust the color to be a little bit blue. You almost never want to use pure white light. Another really important thing is to turn on the fall off so the light gets less intense the further it travels. When we did the multipass setup, the occlusion pass simulated this for us. It also made it look like the light was bouncing around the scene, so now we're going to have to create that by hand. First, I'll add 4 pretty dim lights just underneath the floor. No shadows, just fall off, and since the floor is red, it should be bouncing back red light. Now, I want that red to also bounce onto the wall a bit more, so I'll add 4 more of these floor bounce lights closer to the corners. You can also see that at the bottom of the ball, it's not feeling like it's really touching the floor. So I'll add 1 more light directly underneath it, but I'll set the value of it to be negative. So instead of adding light to the scene, it's actually sucking it away like a black hole. And then the last thing is that the walls should also be bouncing some light around the scene. So I'll add another light behind each of the 4 walls, and boom, now we've got a decent looking scene that was very easy to set up and adjust. So the plus side of lighting a scene this way is that it's a lot simpler. You just keep adding lights and tweak things until they look right. But the downside is that as your scene gets bigger and you add in more effects, render times are going to shoot through the roof. For example, each frame of this really complex shot took only an hour per frame with the multipass approach, but this pretty simple shot inside the briefcase took an hour and a half as a single pass. Plus, you can't fix things in compositing, so if there's a problem, you've got to re-render the whole thing. Now, going back to the production triangle, I'll just change the word fast to easy because it's a bit confusing otherwise. So multipass is good and cheap, but it's a lot harder to do. Single pass is good and easy, but on anything slightly complex it gets really expensive because the render times are so long. And a lot of the time you can't even get it to render without special equipment or software, which we'll talk about in the next episode. The last type of rendering is hardware real-time rendering. It's easy, it's cheap, and there's actually some really cool things happening with it, but you still can't get anywhere near the quality of a software render yet. Well, I just got back from the world premiere in Palm Springs. It was pretty terrifying to watch it in front of a full audience, but everyone seemed to enjoy it, and we made it into the Best of the Fest showcase. So be sure to stay tuned to the blog for more info on where it's playing next. Also, if you enjoyed this episode, be sure to check out FXPhD because they are currently rerunning my Lighting and XSI course. Most of the classes focus on multipass and more of the artistic side of things, but the one class on single pass lighting is really cool because I recorded it in chunks as I was doing the actual production lighting for this scene, so you can see the exact steps that went into lighting this shot from start to finish.
I didn't know you were recording. Sorry, honey.
See you next week.